Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba. Welcome to this week's show. It's episode 10. We're whizzing through the episodes this season. We've got a good rhythm about us, and we're going to review the first week of Eliteserien this week. And we're also going to go back to Sweden as well in part 2 and sort of look at the latest goings on in Allsvenskan. This will be our first episode for quite some time where we have both leagues covered. So strap yourself in, and I hope you're going to enjoy this week's show. And as always, I'm joined by my good friend Steve Wyss. Steve, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you, Jonathan. I hope you're keeping well yourself. Indeed, yes, we've got an episode where we've got both leagues involved for the first time in a while. And from my point of view, it was very exciting to have Eliteserien back, even if it was only 4 matches to start with.
Yeah, now, first of all, I just want to say well done for the season preview. We've had a fantastic response both on our YouTube channel and on the podcast. So really impressive work there, Steve. We've had the Allsvenskan episode as well for those who haven't listened to it. And if you haven't listened to the Eliteserien episode, it was our most recent pod. You can go back and grab that because it was a beast of an episode. And yeah, like I say, we've had a great response. And now we're into week 1, aren't we, Steve?
Yes, thank you very much for the response, both on comments on Twitter, YouTube, and we've had a lot of views and downloads of the episode. So yeah, I'm glad you all enjoyed it, and always feel free to get in touch with us, ask any questions, tweet to us at Nordic Footpod, or myself at Meatman Soccer, or yourself on Twitter as well, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at JFFootball, FUTBOL, and I'm sure we'll review that in a minute. But the first place to start really on this week is the Eliteserien. We're back. It's week 1. First week is in the books. It was a reduced slate, wasn't it? There wasn't as many games as there normally is. It wasn't a full round. But just tell us how many games there were this week, Steve, and read out the results for us, could you?
Yeah, we just started with 4 matches because certain teams weren't able to come back into training as early as others due to the COVID situation rules in Norway. But we did get 4 games. There was going to be 5, but Odd against Sandefjord got postponed because one player tested positive for Odd, which meant that game had to be called off. Probably their match will be off against Stabæk for round 2 as well. But Bodø/Glimt 3, Tromsø 0. We had Molde beat Kristiansund 2-0. Viking with an opening day victory 3-1 against Brann. And then a draw in the late game on Sunday, Vålerenga 1, Rosenborg 1 to round things off for the first round. And all of those teams that played on the Sunday, they're going to be in action in round 2, which is, again, only 4 matches.
Yeah, now you were covering it on Twitter at Nordic Football the weekend we're just gone. I was actually out and about this week, and I was tuning in and sort of scrolling through Twitter to see your reviews and your live updates, which was great. So if you do want that service, then do follow us on Twitter. Steve, where do you want to start with this? Because obviously only 4 games, but there was quite a few things we learned, wasn't there, and some very interesting matches.
Yeah, I mean, I had my eye on the good thing about not having as many games is I can have my eye on all 3 of them because we had 3 on at once and then the later game. So I was able to follow the progress of all the games quite well. Quite used to doing that sort of thing over the years. I can focus on more than one game regularly. But yeah, Bodø/Glimt 3, Tromsø 0. I think is a good place to start. It was an interesting game. The scoreline, you might look at the scoreline and think, it was pretty straightforward again, but there was a lot more to this game than met the eye, I think, in the first place. And I think Tromsø there's a scoreline that was a bit harsh on Tromsø, actually. They were a lot better than I think most people expected in this game.
Yeah, I've been watching the highlights back, and the thing that struck me first was it was great to see fans back in the stadium for this big derby. We talked about it in the season preview. We previewed both sides, and you gave your predictions as to where both times will finish. You've predicted Bodø/Glimt to be top of the table in first place. What was the atmosphere like? Because obviously this is the first game where they've had fans in any kind of significant number since they won the title for the first time in their history. So, being a derby as well, what was the atmosphere like, and how did that impact things? And were Glimt looking as good as they were last season?
I didn't notice much difference, to be honest. Honestly, Bodø/Glimt fans last year, like, they were so loud anyway that 200 felt like 2,000. So the increase to 600. I didn't actually notice a huge difference. I think I noticed more of a difference in Molde and Viking, to be honest. That definitely felt a lot different compared to last year, but. There's a passion up there in Buda that they really do get behind their team so well. And it wasn't long before we heard the goal music, the Buda Glimt goal music, which can really, it was in my head all of last year. They scored so many goals. It didn't take long for them to get a couple of early goals on the board, but it wasn't quite to playing as easy sailing as you would imagine it to be. Like Tromsø, for example, they could have took the lead within 2 minutes in this game. There was a massive chance for Moses Eby very, very early doors, and at that stage, I was like, wow, if he'd scored that, it's maybe a different ball game. And there were certain aspects of the game which certainly, let's say, surprised me with Tromsø. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's 3 points for Buda Glimt. They were quite good as well. But there's positives for both teams to take out of this one.
Yeah, and just looking at the data, and of course, as ever, we are partnered with Wyscout. And we're delighted to also have renewed our partnership with Wyscout. So shout out to Wyscout. Follow them on Twitter at Wyscout, data providers. And according to the data from this match, as you mentioned, it was closer than probably it would suggest. Expected goals for Buda Glimt 1.4, expected goals for Tromsø 1.12. So to be honest, that 3-0 scoreline, you could argue, was perhaps a little bit flattering. The key here seems to be, just from the statistics point of view, was Tromsø's lack of shots on target. I mean, they had 13 shots, nearly double the amount of shots of Buda Glimt, who had 7, but just 2 on target for Tromsø out of 13, 15%, whereas Glimt had 85% shots on target. 6 of their shots from 7 were on target, and 3 of them were goals. Was that the difference here? And I mean, in terms of the formations, it looks like it was a 5-3-2 against the 4-3-3.
Yeah, and you know what? There's not many teams that go 3 at the back in Norway. It's completely opposite to Sweden. We had a great tactical analysis video podcast on that 3-4-3 system in particular recently. And you know what? I actually think it worked really well against Buda Glimt. I do remember last year, the only other side last year that used it against them was Sarpsborg. And they did beat them twice, but they laboured through a victory against them in both games, really, especially the home one. It kind of became 5 at the back, and it kind of reminded me this game about maybe sort of 3 at the back or 5 at the back is the way forward for teams against Buda Glimt a bit. But Tromsø, they were really pressing the Buda Glimt defence. They were not allowing them an easy pass out from the back, and it forced a few mistakes. And I think if Tromsø had some better quality finishes in their team, it could have been a different story. They weren't helped by Runar Espejord getting injured 32nd minute, and he's probably out for at least 2 or 3 games. That's not a surprise, though. We knew he would get injured. Moses Eby is an interesting player. The problem is he's not a natural striker. He never was when I used to watch him at Lillestrøm. He had a spell at Ham Cam in the Obos, and it seems like he's a little bit more adept to be a striker now. But I always considered him a winger. And you could see why, if just the chances that fell his way, he lacks the composure, the finishing touch. And I think they got Eric Kitolano kind of was getting chances in that sort of attacking midfielder role as well. Again, he just couldn't finish properly. They had a youngster, August Mikkelsen, came on, similar spot. Again, just couldn't, they didn't have the finishing. But if I love the system for Tromsø, I've got to give credit to their manager, Gotta Helstrup. He got the sort of midfielders and attackers really, really pressing that Buda Glimt defence. Did force mistakes. Buda Glimt, of course, they got themselves out of trouble quite a lot with some good passing themselves. And Buda Glimt were very, very clinical going forward. That was a big difference. But I think tactically, Tromsø, I was impressed how they matched up. If they keep that up against the big teams, they can certainly give a good account of themselves. And it was encouraging.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very encouraging. And we do normally ask on Twitter for you to send your questions in. Normally we ask it the evening of the episode we record or during the daytime. And we've had quite a lot of questions this week. So I've got to say, a big shout out to our following on social media. We really seem to be growing at the moment. We've had a lot of subscribers on YouTube. Steve just mentioned there the tactical episode we had as well about the 3-4-3, which you can go back and watch on YouTube and feedback what your thoughts were on that, because that had a good response. We've got one question here, which I'll ask you before we move on, maybe 1 or 2 more. But we've got one question I'll ask you immediately now from FPL tactician Andy Martin on Twitter, and it's about Tromsø. He says, despite the result, did Tromsø show enough at the weekend that they shouldn't be worried this season?
It's a good question. definitely. The thing is, right, you can look good against big teams, can't you? And when there's no pressure on you, and the Tromsø's season is going to be defined on their own mini league down the bottom. How are they going to get on against someone like Mjøndalen, Sandefjord, Strømsgodset, teams like that? So that. But what I did see from them there is that they can probably mix it with any team on the day, and perhaps on a good day, if they take their chances, they can surprise a few sides. I think it looks like completely different Tromsø that went down before. They look well organised. They're up for it, and I did see enough that they probably shouldn't be worried. But ultimately, it's like how you do against the teams around you in your own sort of mini league.
Right. Thanks very much, Andy, for that question. And I think that's about it for this game in general, really. Big derby win for Bodø/Glimt, and they get a good start to the season. So let's move on, and we're going to move over to one of the potential challengers this season, who you've put quite high up the table, and that is Molde. And it looks like Kristiansand were sort of just couldn't quite get enough of the job done to have a real impact in this game.
I was disappointed in Kristiansand, and I was thinking after the game, maybe I was being a bit harsh on them, but because at the end of the day, they're facing Molde, who are one of the top sides in Norway. They reached the last, 16 of the Europa League, for goodness sake. So, we can't expect, and they've just lost Armal Pellegrino, who's 25 goal man, but they were toothless. They just didn't seem at the races at all, Kristiansand. They usually do quite well in this type of game, but they were awful. Molde won 2-0, but they should have scored 5 or 6, maybe more. I think if you were backing over 2.5 goals in this game, you would be very angry, Jonathan, because it was 2-0 after that half an hour, and God knows how many chances went to waste. But yeah, Molde were impressive. They dominated in every aspect of the game, just total control. They even missed an early penalty, got away with that. He had a bad game, Owe did. He missed a penalty, then he missed an open goal later on. Got replaced by Fafana for the last 25 minutes. But yeah, it looked like business as usual for Molde. They really looked really up for it and sharp, and disappointing for Kristiansand, really. I think the expected goals, I'm not sure what it was here, but I'd imagine it was pretty damn high for Molde, considering the chances. It was a barrage of chances. It really was.
Yeah, just looking at it now, expected goals for Molde 3.12 against their 2 scored. They had 16 shots in this game, 8 of them on target, versus Kristiansand 0.83 expected goals, 0 goals scored, of course. And they had 9 shots, 5 on target. So, it looks like both sides had a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3. Was there any, interesting tactical twerks in terms of the team selections and things like that? Were there any big surprises in the lineups that caught your eye?
Yeah, Holmgren Pedersen, the right back. I think a lot of people were considering getting him in the fantasy team. He was revealed to be on the bench. So they actually had Erling Knudsen at right back, Knudsen's a right winger. Simple as that. So that was maybe an area that Kristiansand could have attacked and as a weakness, but they just didn't have enough of the ball to do that. So apart from that, wasn't really any surprises. Wolf Hacken was on the bench as expected, didn't even have to come on. It was so easy for Molde, he didn't even have to come on. But honestly, I can't think of a Kristiansand player that I was impressed with apart from the goalkeeper. Sean McDermott can hold his hands up high. He prevented a mauling, and in the end, they've done really well to come out of there only losing 2-0. And look, on the face of it, it might not be a bad loss, Molde are going to be right up there. But I was definitely worried what I saw from Kristiansand there. I just they are due a bad year. They've overachieved so well the last 3 or 4 seasons. They have, by law of averages, they have to have a down year. And maybe I was looking there on Sunday, and I'm thinking this could be the year where it kind of unravels a bit. But it's only 1 match. They're away from home against one of the toughest opponents, so I don't want to be too harsh on them. Yeah,
and in the lineup for Kristiansand, according to Wisecout, was a player called B. By. So it was B. By for their hopes.
Bendik By, yeah.
Yeah, it was B. By for their hopes of winning this game. And we did have a question as well on this match. Well, a statement actually, because we did ask for anyone who wants to tweet games they saw and their own perspectives on the players that stood out to them and that kind of thing. And it's something we may do, more regularly this season. And we had a comment from one person on Twitter, which I'll read out now. And it was from at Nor FTBL, who's a big account following Norwegian football and a good friend of the pod. And he said, I watched the last 20 minutes of Molde KBK. and was very impressed by David Fofana. Should Defo start next game despite their incredible depth? Perhaps even better this year, with a massive sort of a surprised head blown off emoji. So, Steve, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they need to find a way to get him into the lineup, but if we compare him to the strikers that Mulder have used in the last couple of years, Lecky James and Owe or Mowanfo, he's a different type of striker. I've noticed he just has this tendency to drift wide. He likes to drift wide into, especially on the left-hand side. I think he would be really good as like an inside forward on the left wing. And that's my problem with him. I think he doesn't his own personal sort of tendencies and role maybe doesn't suit the Mulder team in that way. Maybe he's got to learn a bit more to be more central. I don't see him as this sort of complete forward that Ohe and Lecky James were for the club. However, he's an unbelievable talent. He's so skillful. He's dribbling, his skill, he's sensational. I think he can finish as well. I mean, he's not necessarily shown it yet. It's very early days, of course, and he has sort of a few chances, including Europa League here. He's kind of not been as clinical as we want. But yeah, he's a fantastic talent. I'd like to see him, I say, on that left wing, actually. I think he could be a really good left wing as an inside forward. But it looks like he's only really going to come on as a striker. He's still going to wreak a lot of havoc, don't get me wrong. They need to find a way to get him more minutes, though, because he's an incredible weapon. I think defenders are going to be scared shitless of him, to be honest, Jonathan. Bringing him down, I think he's going to win loads of penalties, free kicks, things like that. He's got electric pace. Yeah, he's a weapon they need to get more minutes out of.
Yeah, and we did mention him in our preseason episode as well. I think he's a player you've got on your radar to watch this season, and in general for your fantasy team as well, which we will talk about in the next few minutes with fantasy. But it looks like a player that some might consider their team. So let's move over now. That's 2 games covered. Let's move to the third match. You were not too happy with the performance of Brann this week, were you, Steve?
It wasn't shocking from Brann, but I've seen a lot of Brann supporters be negative on Twitter in the last few days, and they're not happy with how things have gone. And I get that. The thing is, they're an ambitious club. Their fans want to be fighting for medals and titles, ultimately. They're a big club. And the harsh reality is they're nowhere near that level right now. That's the problem with Brann. I said them in the season preview they're going to be about mid-table, and I think that's where they'll end up. Viking are the better side right now. It's as simple as that. They've got the better players. They've got, for a start, they've got better players. They seem to have a better coaching methods at the moment. I think Kara Ingebrigtsen, honestly, I'm not sure it's actually going to work out for him at Brann. He was outdated in this game. If we look at what happened with Brann, and they did well to be getting in level at 1-1. They were outplayed. Dauda Bamba scored a header. Fair play to him after last year, a lot of criticism. But they were outplayed, and they ended up 2-1, 3-1 down with about 20, 25 minutes left. And you know what? He's made one substitute, and you're trailing 3-1. I just think, and I've got this criticism actually of Vålerenga and Rosenborg managers a bit later. Try something different. If it isn't working, you don't have to stick to your 4-3-3 system. Why not bring on another striker and go 4-4-2 or something? It's like he made one sub, and it was in the 82nd minute, and he took off youngster David Muller-Wolf, who I think was playing on one of the wings, and he brought on Matthias Rasmussen. There were certain players who were not playing well enough on that field. You can make 5 substitutes, Jonathan, and he made 1, and you're losing 3-1. I didn't get it at all. And, it's like kind of stuck just sticking with the same system, the same ways. I was disappointed how he handled it. Really, he really should know better than that. I mean, I can see why Brann fans were negative, but this is what I expected from the game. I didn't think they would get anything out of it, really. And it's the harsh reality where we are with Brann at the moment. They're just not at the level that the fans want them to be at.
Yeah, now the transfer window closes, I think, quite soon, doesn't it, in Norway? Steve, it might be even imminent. I'm not entirely sure. You'll know more about that than myself. But there's even been disappointment for Brann off the field, because I've read that they failed in their bid to sign Lars Krogh Gerson, apparently, in the last sort of 24 hours or so. He's a player who was at Norrköping last season, and I think it could maybe have been quite an interesting signing for Brann. Is there any major holes in this team that you've seen, or any major weaknesses they need to plug before this window closes? Or what can they do off the field maybe to help this situation?
Yeah, just get a piece of Swiss cheese and slice it and look at it, and that is what Branagh are. There's holes everywhere. I'm afraid, really, to get to the level they want to be at. And I'm particularly concerned about the defence. I was worried about it last year, but I look at it now. It's aging. You got guys like Vegard Foreign he looks a shadow of what he once was. You got Christiansen, who for me he's finished. He was bad last year, and he's too slow. He's out of position now as well. The youngster Cole Skogan, I don't know why he's on the bench. He looked their best prospect last year. I think in midfield they need more of an enforcer. They lack sort of bite in that midfield. And yeah, Bamba, in Bamba they've got a striker who can deliver. If he lives up to his XG this year, he can deliver, but they need a little bit more quality service to him. Petter Strand is good, but that really is not enough else. They could really do with filling quite a few positions, but I think the defence for me, I think they need a bit more younger blood in there with potential. That's the big area for me.
Great stuff. Yeah, and it's disappointing. I mean, how did Viking look? Are you excited about what you see from them?
Yeah, I think fair play to Viking here. They were probably better than I expected. They got this new dual management team, which I was a little bit skeptical, wasn't I? Can you move on from the Bjarne Bertsen era? But they've appointed that management duo in-house, and I think the players knew these guys, and it's all a smooth transition. There's a lot of really good leaders in this Viking team. They really want it a lot. They're led by like Veton Berisha, for example. He's so focused and motivated. He drives the team forward. And, I said before, where would I place them? I put them in 5th place as a prediction because just the sheer quality they've got on paper. And I think you could put pretty much most managers in there as long as they know kind of what they're doing, and you'd get a good outcome with these group of players because they're really well self-managed, self-disciplined. You just kind of feel if you had a bad half, I can't imagine the two managers having to go at them in the dressing room. I could imagine their own players having to go at each other to get themselves back, playing better. That's a really good atmosphere for me, and that's what I like about Viking. They're looking good harmony right now. And do you know what? I said them 5th. If things go really well, maybe they could even push the top 4 if one of the top 4 doesn't have a good year.
Fantastic stuff. And let's move on to the 4th and final game. And it was quite a big game, wasn't it? I mean, between two of the teams you've tipped to be in the top 4 this season. It was Vålerenga against Rosenborg. Steve, tell us the score and tell us the key sort of highlights of this game.
1-1 draw, and the goals came fairly in quick succession, actually. It was an own goal that gave Vålerenga the lead from a corner. Christopher Zachariasen levelled things just before half-time. And it was a sort of a tight tactical battle, really, second half. Both defences had good games. I was a little bit disappointed that Vålerenga didn't take the ball by the horns a bit. I think we saw reasons why both teams probably might not win the gold medal this year. Too many draws, a bit of a reluctance to really gamble, maybe a lack of real movement sometimes in their attacking situations, sort of interchanges like that. And yeah, I think we had quite a few comments about this game on with some of the questions or comments. Appreciate those guys, and we can really talk about this game and what was the good and bad out of it.
Yes, it's certainly a game between sort of two very well supported clubs, wasn't it? And from a sort of statistical point of view, I mean, just looking at some of the stats, and looks like it was Vålerenga who edged it in terms of XG. They had 3.01 XG to Rosenborg's 1.24. Both sides played in a 4-3-3 formation. Am I right in saying that, Stephen? Yeah. Rosenborg only 2 shots on target. Vålerenga only 3 shots on target from 14. So both sides sort of misfiring really up front, weren't they?
I think the high XG from Vålerenga probably was distorted by one massive chance early on where Andre Hansen made 2 saves. There was Kjartansen missed near enough an open goal. I think it was around about the 10th or 15th minute, and I had no idea how they didn't score there. It was a huge situation. Take that out, I think it was quite a tight game, really. There weren't many what you call massive clear-cut chances. It was... I think I'll give credit to Rosenborg in the second half for defending well. They have a really strong midfield which sort of covers the defence strongly, and that back line does hold. There's experience in that back line, and it kind of held itself together well. I think of all the 4 teams that are sort of wanting to win the gold medal potentially could challenge. I think Rosenborg are they're better suited to what I call the dark arts of football, or the shithousery of football, if you want to call it that. They are willing to sort of dig in ugly sometimes to get what they want out of a game. And I think it would suit them, and it would probably suit Vålerenga as well, if the title race was close, where teams are taking points off each other a lot. And I think those teams would benefit that. Whether or not they can actually keep up a pace with, if Bodø/Glimt and Molde keep smashing all the crap teams out of the water and hardly drop points, then these two are not going to be able to keep up. I'll be honest, they're going to draw too many matches. But if the title race becomes close, well, maybe Rosenborg have got a part to play, because, like I say, they do have that sort of nous and know-how. They're quite happy just to get a result, forget how they aim and play. And I think that's a quality that has to be respected sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a few comments from followers on Twitter, as we mentioned. I'm just going to read one of them out now, from Ramon Villageliu Arnella, I believe. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He has said, maybe we underrated Rosenborg and they could battle for the gold medal despite only playing one match. If Islamovic scores the 20 expected goals, Zakariasen continues with surprising second-line arrivals, and the defenders keep their level, I think that they could. Your thoughts, Steve?
It's interesting. Zakariasen is there, for me, their top player. He's become their most important player. Great signing last season. And he makes these runs from midfield and no one can pick him up. He did this at Sarpsborg back in the day as well. He's really good in the air. He just has a knack of being in the right place at the right time. So he's a big, big player. Now, this is an interesting part of this comment. If Lamovic scores the 20 expected goals, I mean, who's expecting to score 20 goals? I'm certainly not. I don't think he's good enough to score 20 goals. If he was to, then it's a different ball game. I just don't think he's a good enough striker. I'll be honest. I think his type of striker, they need someone a bit more. He's a good target man, and he'll have some very good games where he's just unplayable. But is he clinical enough, to get them the huge amounts of goal they need from that position? I look at some of the other strikers in this league, and I think their movement's better than Islamovic. So that's my concern. The defence, though, the defence is strong, and they're a sort of club that can always reinforce during the summer. I like their discipline, but they need to stop drawing games. That's their big thing. Are they going to be able to, who would you rather? Here's a great question. For example, if you say away from home against someone like Haugesund and the four big teams that are there, who are you really backing to win that game? Well, Molde and Bodø/Glimt could blow Haugesund out of the water with their sort of fast-paced goals, constant scattergun shots and things. Where someone like Vålerenga or Rosenborg might just sort of labour to a draw without a cutting edge. And that's my problem with Rosenborg. Unless they're nicking them games 1-0, they're probably going to draw too many. For me, they lack goals, unless Islamovic just come big.
Yeah, great stuff. And to wrap up this section of Norway, we're going to look at fantasy now. Steve, you set up the league and you've done some very good work in that sense, setting the league up. And we've had a pretty good response. Do you want to give it an overview? But before you do, a couple of questions from listeners, and I want to give a shout out to Neil Baxter. He says, after this week's games, which assets for both leagues are firmly on your radar? So that's one I want to address for Norway first. And also we had another question from Josh Hemmings. And he says, which RBK assets are the most viable for the double? Is a triple up worth it? So, let's just wrap up fantasy. Tell us the state of play of the Eliteserien league. Tell us what's going on with that.
Yeah, I think the highest score across the board of anyone in Eliteserien fantasy this week was 94 points. It seemed you needed to have Erik Botham in your team, Ulland Andersen and Orsnes. The Nordic Football Podcast League, I think the highest score is 85. It was someone called Guta Ramon Vigliu, which was very well done there. That's the guy who just answered the question about Rosenborg. So well done, Ramon. Yeah, I thought that seemed familiar. Well done on leading the league early doors. Rosenborg assets is interesting. I still think Emil Conrad and Saida could be someone that can make a difference for them. He's the one player who could probably tear up some of the crap defenses because he's got that thing about him. But I'm not sure the manager fully trusts him to certainly do enough 90 minutes. So that would worry me. I wonder if Marcus Henriksen might do a job for you. He's a 6.5 million rated defender, but he plays midfield. I noticed he put a couple of shots in, actually. He is known for a long-range strike. And, you know, if he doesn't play in defence and he's more midfield, then he could be someone that goes above his value. But apart from that, you probably need to be looking at getting Zacharias in your team if you can somehow fit him in. And, you know, it's not easy with the money in the Eliteserien fantasy. But Zacharias looks like he may well pick up this season where he left off. You know, last year he scored a lot of points in 2020, 146 points, 12 goals, 4 assists. And they had 9 clean sheets as well. So I think you probably need to be looking to get Zacharias in. I would personally not be looking at Islamovic. But that's just my personal preference.
Yeah, and thanks a lot to Neil Baxter as well for that question. I don't know if you feel like you've touched on that enough. Steve, do you want to add one final comment?
Neil, of course, thank you very much indeed for your question, Neil Baxter. I hope you're doing well, by the way, Neil. Always good to interact with you. Which assets are firmly on my radar? Let me think. Which players are on my footballing radar here for the Eliteserien fantasy? And I'm actually looking at Tromsø, weirdly, because I think Moses Abi is a 5.5 million striker, and he could actually... He's going to be starting games now that Esbjørn's injured. I think he would have been starting anyway. He had opportunities against Bodø/Glimt. Can he take them? That's the big question. But I think he could do an awful lot worse than a 5.5 million rated striker. And Daniel Berntsen interests me as well at 6 million. He is only owned by 0.4% of people, and he's on some set pieces. And I just felt he made a little bit of a nuisance of himself. I could see him chipping in with a few assists maybe at some point there. Kitalano's a little bit more expensive at 7.5 million. If he gets into more advanced sort of positions, more goal scoring positions, then maybe you could look at him. But initially I was thinking, before Tromsø's first 3 games are brutal, I was thinking there's not really much point getting any Tromsø players in the side. But now I'm just starting to think that, you know, they've got Molde at home on Thursday. Then they're away against Viking. I think their offensive assets could do okay in those games. I think defensively they'll do well to stop conceding goals. After that, they actually have Sandefjord at home, which is a very winnable fixture, and then Strømsgodset away, which is another very manageable game. And actually after that, they got Sarpsborg at home. And if we're looking even further, Stabæk away, it's not a bad run. If you can get through the first week, I think Tromsø players are maybe worth looking at. I was initially sort of not thinking about them, but yeah, I think on those sort, and well worth keeping an eye on. I think Vålerenga, there's a few questions about them. I just want to start off with David Weatherson, actually, who made some interesting comments about the Glimt game as well. He said he thought Aaron Dunham looked sharp. He was impressed with Sarri as well. And I think that is a very good point about the Vålerenga assets there. Sarri is obviously a top talent, but his price in this game is only 8 million. Now, a lot depends whereabouts he's going to play, left wing or sort of centre mid driving forward. I feel like there's some really big games in him this year. I totally agree with David there. I think it's going to be, he could be one at 8 million as sort of one of the more cheaper midfielders. Layuni, I'll be honest, I wasn't impressed with him first game. I don't think he makes enough runs in the penalty area. When the ball's on the right hand side, he's not in position to score enough. He's better when he's on the ball himself. And that's a slight problem for me for Layuni. It might take him a little bit of time to get used to the system. Aaron Donham, you can't go too far wrong with him. He'll score some individual goals, but he needs a little bit more help in that Vålerenga offense, really. Appreciate all the questions. And just want to go back to David. Well worth checking out his blog, davidweatherstonfootball.com. Really some good match previews there, some betting stuff, but I always appreciate that. And thanks very much for your support, David. As always, I know you often come in with some questions and everything.
Yeah, and you know, Steve, as we're actually speaking, I'm scrambling away trying to get my fantasy team in because I missed the deadline. So it's a nightmare start for me in this league. You know, I know I was one of the bottom feeders of the league last season. I was near the bottom of the table, and if this first week's anything to go by, it's going to be another season near the being the sort of Sheffield United of this league because I missed the deadline and I haven't done my team. And it's a terrible start for JF football. But thanks a lot everybody who got their questions in. It looks like fantasy is going to be very popular among our listeners this season, that's for sure, with so many questions. I think I'm going to finish this half of the show. I think there was one more comment. Steve, we're not going to touch on every single question this week because we've had so many, and some of them are deep questions that we might come back to in future weeks. But you mentioned the question from David there, which was great, and there was also a comment on Wallrenga, I think, wasn't there, and about how North Football asked one more question. You can keep it brief if you like. Is VIF's attacking trio Lajuni, Kiatis, and Donham the best in the Eliteserien?
It has the potential to become the best, but I think Lajuni needs to, get used to the system a bit more. And I'll be honest, I would prefer. Probably the issue is the wide players, Lajuni and Donham, and maybe not the greatest finishers, like of easy chances. It's a weird thing to say. Aaron Donham, you'd fancy him to bang in a few real beauties this year or some goals of individual quality. Is he going to be there for the tap-in at the back post, though? Is he going to be there for the easy finish? I'm not sure. And Lajuni is perhaps even worse at doing that, That's my concern. If you're not careful, Kjartanson's going to be the only one sort of poaching for goals. And then if teams sort of treble up on him, you might be able to snuff them out. They need to work on their movement a bit. The potential's there, but they need to work on it. That's
enough for part one then. That is the first round, or first 4 games anyway, of Eliteserien. Recap nicely. If you haven't joined the Fantasy League yet, the website is fantasy.eliteserien.no, something that I've bookmarked. And the code to join our league is EV70I0. So get your team in for round 2 and in round 3. There was one other game, Steve, wasn't there? Just very briefly, it was postponed, wasn't it? Just to give us a one-liner on that.
Yeah, there was one positive test in the Odd camp this week. So Odd Sandefjord got called off. There's a quarantine measures as well. I think there's some more tests ongoing this week. We'll know more. Probably a high chance that Stabæk against Odd will also be put back for round 2, but we're not sure yet. Obviously, a real frustration. Odd were affected back end of last year with this as well. But we wish everyone well at the club, and hopefully it'll be the last of any COVID outbreaks. But sadly, I fear there'll be quite a few.
Yep, and that will wrap it up. I mean, the games we've got this week coming, by the way, are Kristiansand, Buda Glimt, Brann, Vålerenga, Tromsø, Molde, and Rosenborg Viking. So some fairly big games there for across the week. So stay tuned, and we'll review those as well, in the bonus pods and other pods to come. That wraps it up for part 1 in Norway. In part 2, we will be looking at Sweden. We've had a week off from Sweden, so we'll recap all the latest, and we'll answer some of your listener questions as well related to Allsvenskan. It's been a pretty juicy round this week, so join us in part 2, and we'll be back after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm joined by Jonathan Fadugba, and this is going to be the Swedish section of the Allsvenskan. We are now 5 rounds into the season, and the latest results are as followed. Örebro 1, Halmstad 0, IFK Gothenburg 1, Hacken 1, Hammarby 3, Sirius 2, Elfsborg 2, Kalmar 2, Mjällby 1, Östersund 0, Malmö 3, Valberg 2, Degerfors 2, Djurgården 0, and Norrköping 2, AIK 0. So, 5 rounds in now, Jonathan. How is that table looking in Sweden?
Yes, thank you, Steve. The season is starting to take a bit of shape here in Sweden. 5 out of 30 games completed. So, any of you who are good at maths will be able to figure that one out percentage-wise. We're averaging 2.3 goals per match in Allsvenskan at this moment in time, which is a decent number. And we currently have a top 5. I'll read from 5th to top. Top 5 of AIK in 5th, 9 points. Kalmar in 4th, 9 points with plus 2 goal difference. 1 more goal difference than AIK. 3rd place, bronze medal at the moment, 10 points is Malmö. Joint with Norrköping, who are in 2nd place, but a much better goal difference, plus 5 versus Malmö's plus 1, 10 points. But top of the table at this moment in time, despite their shock defeat, which we will talk about later, is Djurgården. with 12 points. So it was the first defeat of the season. They'd won every other game apart from that. So yeah, it really was a big shock. But that's the top 5. And in the bottom, at the moment, we've got Varberg in the relegation playoff with just 4 points from 5 games. 10 goals conceded, the most in Allsvenskan so far, by the way. We've got Örebro 15th in the relegation place, minus 8 goal difference, 4 points. And rock bottom, Steve. Can you believe this? 5 games played, 0 wins, 2 draws, 3 defeats. BK Hacken with 2 points.
I know. I mean, they are unbeaten in the last 2. That's the positive. I'll tell you what, Örebro have done well to get 4 points by only scoring 1 goal, haven't they? I'll give them that. I'll give them credit there. But yeah, it's. I really feel like Djurgården should be 100%, and we're going to talk about them soon. But there was a really big game on Monday night, Norrköping against AIK. The winner, whoever won that game, was going to end up in second place. AIK, if they'd actually got the 3 points, they would certainly gone level with Djurgården. So it was a big game, 2-0 win for Norrköping. I had my eye on this one as well, but it was a pulsating fixture, wasn't it, Jonathan?
Yes, this was a good game of football. This was a sort of game of football that I enjoy. Had a bit of beef behind it. Rickard Norling against his former club. It had the sort of wrestling, WWE wrestling sort of storylines behind the scenes and that kind of thing. There was criticisms. There was bad blood before the game. Little comments here and there. Norling, taking little pot shots at 1 or 2, and little things like that. So yeah, it was really, and on the field, it was a really enjoyable match, I thought. Okay, went into it. Both teams tried to play football. We had the 3 at the back Allsvenskan YouTube video and podcast episode where we went into real detail. We didn't talk too much about Norrköping, but we did touch on them. And they're 3-4-3. That's starting to take shape now under Norling, and I think they look quite an exciting team. And they approached it in an exciting way. I think the key here, Steve, I haven't really looked at the stats yet, but I think the key in this match was obviously Norrköping won 2-0. 2 second-half goals from Samuel Adegbenro. I think really the key in this match, Steve, was one team took their chances and one team didn't. It was open. Both sides did have chances and did create things. But with AIK, they just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. Stefanelli hit the post. They had some other good chances. Janssen made some great saves. Whereas Norrköping were just a bit more efficient in front of goal, a bit more, they got the job done. They were a bit more clinical. With Adegbenro as well, who's been in really good form this season so far. He's top scorer in the league now, I believe. So yeah, it was a tale of sort of 2 boxes really. But yeah, I mean, it was the whole thing when Rickard Norling made it a spicy game. I think at the end of the match, he was sort of pumping his fists, and it was really rubbing it. He was really loving it, to be honest, reveling in it. And I was quite surprised about that, considering he's got a really high standing in AIK, and it's not gone down too well with some of the fans. I think I read a quote on Twitter this evening that I think it was an AIK fan or journalist sort of said it was unacceptable. So, like I said, it was one of those games with a little bit of an edge to it, and it lent for a good game.
It reminded me a lot of Djurgården against Norrköping, actually. That one, 1-0 to Djurgården. It was very end-to-end. It was just a question of probably who scored the first goal, really. But Adegbenro got a brace. He's been scoring a lot of goals recently. Nor Football asked in a question here, Adegbenro back to his best form under Rickard Norling, and I want to expand on that, Jonathan. Why do you think his form has been so good? I mean, obviously staying fit is a big thing for Samuel, but it can't just be that. Why is he thriving in this system?
Well, I think bottom line is he's a very good player. It's simple as that.
Yes.
He's been in my fantasy team since day one. The fun thing about doing this podcast, I think, with you, Steve, is that we're sort of the cross-pollination, isn't there? You cover your league, I cover my league, but we also sort of keep an eye on each other's leagues. And I just remember Adegbenro when you talked about him in Norway, and he was always a player that was on my radar, to be honest. So to see him in Sweden, I was very, very happy when he joined Norrköping, to be honest, because I was like, yes, I'll get to watch him a bit more close quarters in Sweden. Didn't really think his career would go in this direction. I thought maybe he would move on to maybe a bigger league, but I'm more than happy to have him here, to be honest. And I think Norrköping fans would say the same. I mean, Jonathan Levi has come out post-match and said that he is, he said that Norrköping have the 5 best strikers in Allsvenskan. So that is, some praise for his own teammates. He said that Haksabanovic Niemann, Carl Bjork, Adik Benro, and himself, Levi, are the top 5 strikers. So that's some praise. But he said some very, very nice words about Adik Benro. And he said, I'm not surprised at all at how well he's doing. I've said it before, and this is not because I have not played with Messi and Ronaldo, but he's the best player I've ever played with. Before I came here as well, when we played together in Rosenborg, he was outstanding, and he now shows that too. Obviously, they both played for Rosenborg, as you'll know, and he's doing really well now at Norrköping. He said once he is hungry, he scores points and goals. He really plays in the right position. He can play on the left, and he's even better than as a 9 on the right side. He has even more to give, and I'm very glad he's here. And he's touched on something really well there. Adik Benro can play on either side. So in this 3-4-3 of Norlings, he can kind of play in almost any position. He can play from the left, maybe cut inside. He can play from the right. He can play as an out-and-out target man. So it's allowed a lot of flexibility in that team. Now, his goals were very well taken. They were both crosses from the left-hand side. First one was Skulason. He put in a ball from the left. He'd just come on as a substitute, in fact. So it was a really great impact from him. He whipped in a lovely left-footed cross, and Adik Benro pounced on it and put it away. And then the same with the second goal. It was Haksabanovic with a right-footed cross from the left. Adik Benro put a lovely header in off the post. So, yeah, he looks sharp. He's back fit again. His teammates love him. He's hungry. And I think he's just found the right place for him at this moment in time. I don't know how long he'll stay in the league, because I do think he is one of the best strikers in the league. I think he will, if he stays fit, I think he will stand out very quickly. But the one thing we can definitely say is that he is already doing very, very well.
That's excellent to hear. And just before we finish talking about Norrköping, we've got a question coming from Gally at Indy J. Gally, a semi-retired sea captain. Interesting little bio there. Simple question: can Norrköping win the Allsvenskan?
I think it might be a bit early for them. I really like what I see from Norling. I think he's taken the team in the right direction. I think my preseason prediction, I had them kind of a little bit further down. I think I have them 5th. I may upgrade that at some point, maybe to 4th, 3rd-ish. But I think at this moment in time, I wouldn't say champions. I think they have a little bit more work to do, just getting the blend right. But one thing we know about Norling is he knows how to win titles. He's done it before. So from that point of view, I think fans can probably be quite excited. I think there is a real bit of a buzz coming about Norrköping at this moment in time from fans. I think they probably didn't quite expect the season to start so well, as it has, for them to be in 2nd. With three wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat, and they've had some difficult games as well, by the way. So they've played AIK, they played Djurgården away, but they lost that game. So I think they'll have bigger tests to come. They've played Sirius, Halmstad, and Örebro as well, who are probably 3 of the weaker teams. Certainly Halmstad and Örebro anyway. So I think they'll have bigger challenges to come. This is their biggest result of the season so far. But I do think they're in the right direction. I like the 3-4-3. It looks quite well balanced. I think Norling's implemented that fairly quickly, which bodes well. You've got Janssen doing okay at the back. He made some great saves, to be honest, in this game. He was really, really good. Don't know exactly how many, but certainly made a lot of saves to keep his team in the game. I remember one save that he tipped over the bar when it could have easily been a goal. You got Linus Wahlqvist, Marco Lund, and Agualius at the back 3. Agualius is very versatile. I like him. Wahlqvist, I've always said, he's one of the best defenders in Allsvenskan. Obviously, he left and came back, and he's now their captain. And I think he's a top level player for Allsvenskan. The midfield 4 in that 3-4-3 system is kind of Abdul Razak, who's still learning his trade. Bergman Johannesson, we've talked about him before. He's a quality player in the making. Franson and Levi. And then you've got Adik Benro, Carl Bjork, and Sead Haksabanovic with the sort of forward 3. And they've got a lot of options off the bench as well, Steve. They've got Skulason, as I said. They've still got Niemann to come back. They've got Tello. They've got a few others. So, they're in good shape. I don't think they'll win the league. But if they can get to sort of 10 games in and they can keep this form up and be sort of in the top 3, we could revisit it then, I think, and maybe see where we go from there.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And just before we move on, I want to talk about AAK and my problem here with them. They were very wasteful in front of goal. I don't know how they didn't score, to be honest. It felt like they certainly he was so dominant early on. It just looked like a matter of time before they'd score. And yeah, the goalkeeper had a good game for Norrköping. I do rate that keeper, actually. He's impressed me quite a lot. But they have to be taking the chances for me. Stefanelli, it feels like he's due like a glutton of goals. He gets in. I don't know quite what the problem is. It's like he snatches at chances. But it's let them down here. They probably should have won the game. They were so dominant early on, and they somehow lost it.
Yeah, that is the story. I think AIK are one of those teams that they're a work in progress, in my opinion. I think they still lack a top goal scorer, potentially. I'm not sure about Radulovic. He's a new signing. I think he'll take some time to blend in. I think he played at Brighton in the past, and I think he'll need some time. Henrik Goitom had a great career, player massively respected in Sweden. So I would never knock him, but I do think his best days are probably, arguably behind him. He is in his 30s now, and sort of he's captain, but can he be relied on week in, week out to get sort of 10, 15, 20 goals? I'm not sure anymore. I'd probably say no. He's 36 now, so he's like I say, he's had a great career, but was taken off early here. Stefanelli hit the post. I still like Stefanelli, but he is a bit inconsistent at times in terms of just getting goals. And I also think that AIK for me have a lot of players who are prospects and maybe not finished article. That's just my personal opinion. Bahui, for example, I know he's getting older. I know he's 30, but for me he's a little bit inconsistent at times. I think Liatupa is another one who's a prospect. He's 21. Some games he's really good as earlier in the season, but some games he sort of drifts in and out of matches. This being one of them, I think he kind of drifted out of this game. He lost possession 11 times in this game, Steve, and didn't really had no shots, 2 key passes, but didn't really do too much in the game. Was taken off. So yeah, they have some just players that you can't quite rely on. I think the team is coming together bit by bit. I really like some of the players in their back four. I think they are improving defensively slightly. But all in all, I just think AIK are a work in progress. And so, I would predict them to finish probably below Norrköping at this moment in time.
All the teams at the top there have been given a boost. Djurgården, the seemingly indestructible Djurgården, have really dropped a bollock this week, haven't they, by losing to Degerfors, of all teams, 2-0. I was looking at the stats of this game in running, and it just looked a matter of time before Djurgården would surely win the game or score a goal. But they were hit hard late here. And one of the goals scored by Victor Edvardsson was sensational, wasn't it?
Probably goal of the season, Steve. I mean, if you've not seen it, then try and grab it on Discovery or YouTube or wherever you can find it, because it was a David Beckham against Wimbledon from the halfway line, basically. A ball given away in the midfield, and he just pounced on it and booted it home from 50 yards. I mean, I've never seen a Russian goalkeeper look so embarrassed in all his life. The keeper, Vasiutin. He looked like he couldn't believe it when he sort of turned around and it had gone in. It was one hell of a strike from Edvardsson. It was a shame it wasn't in front of more fans, because it was it was a goal that deserved a full stadium. Really, it was just unbelievable. He ran off, and there was a little tent with about sort of 20 Degerfors fans, and he ran off to celebrate with them. But yeah, it was a goal that could have graced any game. To be honest, it was an unbelievable strike, and he also finished off his second goal with a lovely counter-attack move. Great distribution from Diawara at the back, who, by the way, Degerfors seemed to have a decent keeper there, Diawara, and they went on the counter-attack late in the game and got the second advance, and it was a good finish, poked it home. So yeah, really big win that, and a real turn up for the books, to be honest. We talked about Degerfors in real detail on that 3 at the Back podcast, and they lost, I think, their next game, but now they've beaten probably the best team of the season so far. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my gut feeling is I think that was a bit of a freak result, really. I think Djurgården is still really good, and I think Degerfors still going to have problems. But fair play to them, they got the 3 points there, haven't they, Degerfors? And it certainly makes things interesting at the top of the table. Let's talk about the Gothenburg derby, IFK against Hacken. And how did that one go, Jonathan? It ended 1-1.
Yeah, now this was a decent game. It was a game of many chances. I think Pontus Dahlberg, well, he's paid his loan fee, that's for sure. Certainly from Watford, because he against his former club is a tale of revenge this week. Really, this weekend in terms of some of the bigger games, because obviously the former EF man Dahlberg, he made several saves to keep Hacken in this one. He's on loan from Watford at Hacken, and he was excellent. They made a lot of big saves to keep them in it. Then of course, came back to sort of haunt his team, as I say. The game ended 1-1. So Hacken took the lead early in the second half, and then it looked like they were probably going to hang on for a win, but a 96-minute penalty from Tobias Sana rescued a point for EF Core and rescued their blushes against their sort of crosstown rivals. Probably on balance, maybe you could argue it was possibly a fair result, but yeah, it really spared their blushes. A good pass from Marek Hamsik. He obviously got this where he set up the penalty, played in the ball into the box, and I think it was Stig Thorsen that won the spot kick. But it was a real under pressure sort of through ball from Hamsik in midfield to sort of split the defense open and basically help that lead to that penalty. So yeah, it was an open game, 1-1, probably a result that Hacken won't be happy with, but at least it wasn't. They would have wanted to hang on. It was a shame for them, especially with the fact that they're bottom of the table. But yeah, it was a good game.
They're the only team without a win, Hacken, and it just feels like not a lot is going for them right now. I kind of sense they've been waiting for a soft fixture just to get their teeth into. They've got it in midweek, Hacken against Örebro. I mean, if they don't win that and they've got Mjällby after that, if they're not getting 6 points out of those two games, you really are starting to worry for them, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they can't beat Örebro, it will be probably big criticisms for their manager. He's already been under a little bit of pressure. There was rumours that maybe there were calls for him to maybe leave. I still think that's probably slightly premature, but we shall see. So it's. I think they're a little bit unlucky in some ways, because they've had some tough fixtures and little things have not gone their way this season as well. And although they haven't been great, I still think bottom of the league just seems quite strange. A big thing will be, can they keep Dahlberg, because he could leave. His loan ends soon. He's got a cup final, of course. They've got a cup final to play potentially, but we don't know if he'll play in that. And he's been really, really good. He's probably the best player in the derby, I would say. He made several saves, as I've mentioned. They made an unbelievable save from Stig Thorsen in the 90th minute. And I think he's one of the best goalkeepers in Allsvenskan for sure. So will Watford sort of let him stay? That will be an important deciding factor. And just in general, they've been doing different things. Hacken, they've been trying to, they weren't happy with the penalty for a start. They weren't happy with a few other decisions that didn't go their way in this game. So that they've had a lot to complain about, this last week or so. And I think that's the key, really. Pontus Dahlberg described it as a fucking joke. That's a direct quote, by the way. Yeah, and there's just this air around him of Andreas Alm. He described, he thought it was harsh, and he said he was frustrated and angry. There's just this air of kind of like things not going their way at this moment in time. So yeah, it will be interesting to see where we go with Hacken.
We've got an interesting fixture dynamic coming up in the Allsvenskan. We've got a midweek round approaching, then they're back in action at the weekend, and then round number 8 is on the 22nd to 24th. Then we've got a 6-week break. The league goes out of action for 6 weeks, I'm guessing, for the Euros. And we don't actually get the final round till December this year in Sweden, which is quite late for the Allsvenskan. There's certainly a few teams that need to be getting points on the board before this break, this round 8. But then, having 6 weeks off, it's probably going to help some teams and hinder others, isn't it?
Well, it will. I mean, firstly, from EF Core's point of view, I think Hamzik's contract is up quite soon. So, there was all this fanfare. Will he even be around for much longer? He could not. He might not even be around. He's done okay. But I still think he's lacking complete match sharpness, to be honest, and he's gradually getting it. But yeah, I think he could well be out of the league by the time he gets fit. So he did admit he was there to sort of get his fitness for the Euros, and yeah, that's something that's going to be a factor. Certain players will leave. Always happens in Allsvenskan. You get a decent period, and then you get the summer window, and it can change a lot of the course of the trajectory of the season, to be honest. So yeah, I think it will affect things. But we'll see how it goes.
Will you prioritise watching some Eliteserien games over Euros, Jonathan, in the 6-week break?
Good question. Yeah, if I can get my fantasy team in, then yes. I'm not massively bothered about the Euros. I'll be honest. I think I'm not sure how good the spectacle will be. We'll see. Could be wrong, but I get this sense that a lot of players will be very tired after a really, really draining sort of 18 months or so, 12 months to 18 months. So, what will the level of quality be like in the Euros? I'm not sure. I think it will be a very big ask to have a great tournament, and obviously I don't think there's a huge amount of fans there. I'm not too sure. I haven't really studied it yet, but yeah, why not? I'm up for a bit of Eliteserien.
That sounds good. That sounds very good indeed, my friend. And talking about sort of Eliteserien Allsvenskan here, I got a question that's come in from Rafa Roldan, who is a coach at Östersund. So thank you very much for the question here. You should be brave this week and decide which league is the most competitive. And it would be nice to know what parameters you base the answer with. I think that was a little bit of a slight accusation that we were sitting on the fence with the previous question that was asked about what was the best league between Allsvenskan and Eliteserien. This is a more interesting sort of question about competitive side of things. So in short here, Jonathan, which would you say is the more competitive league?
Well, we talked about this pre-match or pre-recording. I'm going to say Allsvenskan because I'm biased, but I'm sure you're going to say Norway. My argument in terms of competitiveness, I've been looking at the games this season, and there's not many games I've been able to actually predict in the sense of the clear favourite. Even though I think the bookmakers, there's a lot of games where neither team is the huge favourite. Normally in a lot of leagues, you can't really predict games. I mean, you only have to look at this Degerfors Djurgården game. You got to look at sort of Östersunds against Malmo. I'm sure that will be a good example for the person asking the question. Be it working at Östersunds, Malmo, Östersunds came very close to sort of even getting a win there. So I think it's a very competitive league at the moment, Allsvenskan, to be honest. We've had different league winners, for 3-4 years in a row now. The era of sort of Malmo dominance is over. There's loads of competitors. You've asked me about Norrköping maybe winning the league there. You've got AIK have won the title in recent years. Djurgården have won the title in recent years. Malmo obviously are the big dogs. EF Core are always competitive. So, you've got Kalmar up there at the moment. So I think it's a really, really competitive league at this moment in time. There's not many games I go into and think this is a definite win for X, Y, and Z. And the big games between the big teams as well are always very hard to predict. So yeah, I'm at this moment in time, I'm going to say that Allsvenskan is more predictable. When I look at Norway, I mean, I'll admit my knowledge of it is not as much, but when I look at Norway, there seems to be games where I find you can probably predict who's going to win this match and with a bit more certainty. That's the feeling I get. So yeah, I'm comfortable to make the case for Allsvenskan. Steve, what do you think?
I agree. I actually agree with you here. I think Allsvenskan is the more competitive league. I'm not saying it's the best league, but it is the more competitive league. There's a reason I'm writing previews for the Eliteserien, Jonathan. There's a reason I'm predicting matches over there, because you're right. There's some very obvious calls to make, and that's good from my point of view. But yeah, competitive probably is Allsvenskan. Thanks for the question, Rafa. Anyway, interesting stuff.
When you say obvious calls, can you give a bit more background on that? Because obviously you cover it, and your aim is to predict results, right? So just give us a bit more insight on that.
There's some for example, Molde have won 25 of the last 30 home games. Buda Glimt won 100% home matches last year. I mean, historically, there's some massive fortresses at home. Like Rosenborg would rarely even lose at home when they were winning their titles. I feel like there's a big discrepancy between the top and the bottom. Like, can you imagine Sandefjord this year or Mjøndalen really getting anything against the top four? Not me. There's not that many shocks. There's generally not that many matches that I'm really like, wow, that's a shock. Of course, there's always going to be some, but I think the big teams are usually going to batter the crap ones quite easily. You're not going to get a Malmo Ostersunds very often in Norway, for example.
Yeah, that's exactly my feeling, and I think it was only highlighted by some of the games we're going to talk about now. As we mentioned, obviously, Malmo played Varberg and it was fairly close, and obviously, other teams have played as well where it's been very close. Degerfors beating Djurgården, I can't see that too many times in Norway. So yeah, good to get some insight there. Yeah, thanks a lot for the question.
Yeah, I mean, going back to these results recently in Allsvenskan round 5, and what else caught your eye of the other games?
Yeah, well, if we just run through the games, I mean, one thing that caught my eye was I wouldn't say it's a shock result, but Mjällby beating Ostersunds. Ostersunds have had a good start to the season, but results have just started to taper off a little bit now. They've had a few defeats now in a row. Obviously, lost at home to Varberg last week, which we didn't talk about. We didn't cover Allsvenskan last week, so their good start to the season is kind of over. They battered Örebro, didn't they? They got a point at Malmo, and now they've lost two on the spin. Narrow defeats. Varberg was a 90th minute defeat. Ostersund had gone 1-0 up, and then this week as well, they've lost to a 1-0, against Mjällby, a narrow defeat again. But it's not a good sign for Ostersund, because they do need to get as many points on the board as possible, especially against teams like Varberg and Mjällby. The highlight of this game for me, Steve, was the goal itself, because I did mention on this preseason podcast that Jacob Bergstrom is one beast of a unit of a player, a beast. And his goal, if anyone's seen his goal, he actually runs into he closes down. It's one of those ones where you close down the cross and you tap it in from sort of 4 or 5 yards, and he absolutely clatters into the post as he scores. And Steve, I don't think I've ever seen this in football. The post the whole goal frame nearly fall. Like the goal frame came off worse than Bergstrom. I mean, if you watch it, the goal frame nearly falls apart. I've never seen a goal post nearly snap in two, and Bergstrom came off fine. It really highlighted to me that player. I like Bergstrom. I think he's an absolute unit of a player, and there aren't many target men like him around. Real strong as an ox he is. And a perfect example of that was how, he nearly managed to snap a goalpost by clattering into him. So, yeah, it was a good win for Mjällby. I think they needed that, but a bit of a poor defeat for us. It takes Mjällby up to 9th.
I mean, they're at it here, Mjällby. They've scored 2 goals all season. They've got 7 points. I mean, how are they doing it? It's crazy. They're 100% on under 2.5 matches. In fact, their results read 0-0, 0-2, 0-1, 1-0, 1-0. I mean, that's awful. I mean, this is like French football sort of scores here. And, they're not the greatest side to watch, are they? Mjällby, it seems. But, they got 7 points on the board. Fair play to them. Some other games from the weekend. Hammarby had an exciting one, didn't they? 3-2 against Sirius there.
Yeah, they did. I still think they're very porous. I still think they leak too many goals to be taken seriously as their sort of title contenders, that's for sure. But they're in 7th. They've scored 8 and conceded 8. So that sort of sums them up. They're always going to score, but they're always going to concede. So there's 0 goal difference, of course. It was a good win for them. Sirius are looking sort of fairly competitive. I think they'll be a tough team.
Yeah.
On their day, they're a hard side to break down and sort of get the better of. Hammarby went 2-0 up, Kalili and Jeppe Andersson. Sirius pulled it back to 2-1. Then Akin Kumiamu scored to make it 3-2, and then Ekin Bullet with a sort of 90th minute goal to reduce the scoreline. But Hammarby drew 1-0 with Hacken as well last week. 4 points in their last 2 games has sort of helped push them up the table a little bit after their first their sort of rocky start to the season. So but Sirius are above them. They're in 6th, and that just shows you sort of how well Sirius have been doing so far this season. They're a team that I found it hard to predict them because they got the new manager and a lot of squad changes and stuff. But this was their first defeat of the season, so they were unbeaten in the first 4. So that's an interesting one, and Sirius are going quite well.
Elsewhere, a good comeback from Kalmar against Elfsborg from 2 down. Malmo with a 3-2 win against Varberg. Plenty of goals around there. What have you made of that? There's certainly some teams that are more involved in sort of goals matches and others that are just plain boring, it seems.
Yeah, well, the interesting one for me was Varberg Malmo. I mean, Varberg made it a lot tougher than I would have expected. I think they weren't great, 0.63 xG against Malmo's 2.03 xG, 3-2 in the end. Malmo played a 4-2-3-1. Varberg sort of packed the back line. We talked about 5-3-2s, haven't we, Steve? And Varberg went for a 5-4-1. Had a 5-man back line, and they just sort of looked to try and reduce the damage. But Malmo kind of struggled. It was a game that you would have expected maybe would be. We talked about competitiveness. You'd expect Malmo to win this sort of comfortably, but no, Varberg gave a good effort of it and did okay. So like I say, at this moment in time, I feel like the league is really quite competitive. And in terms of the other game you mentioned, Elfsborg Kalmar, I'll be honest, I can't comment on this one. I didn't see it, but a 2-2 draw. Kalmar are going really, really well at the moment. I'm sure that our good friend Ove Pettersson will be happy. But yeah, it's a decent start to the season for Kalmar. They are. I did say in pre-season that I think they'll go quite well, and so far they're proving me right. They're the only Allsvenskan team that still has an unbeaten record.
Yes, and that's interesting. Only one team still unbeaten after 5 games. That's a real surprise, isn't it? The one other game was Örebro 1, Halmstad 0. First victory for Örebro, and
yes, Dennis Hummett is off the mark. He's a player I quite like. I think this is a big year for him. I think he's got something to prove in Allsvenskan. Show he can do it consistently. Finally got his first goal, and he looked so happy when he scored. Actually, he ran off and he looked delighted. I forgot to mention as well, by the way, Malmo, Berman Savic got his first goal as well for the club. So he'll be happy with that. He's he's one of their 2 new signings. But yeah, for Örebro, it was a much needed win. There was rumours Axel Kjell's job could be under threat if they lost this one. Poor defending from Halmstad for the goal. They kind of gave it away. They defensively, they've been okay. 1 goal conceded, 5 conceded in 5. They've been decent considering they've been newly promoted, but that was a poor goal to concede, really, an individual mistake, and Hummert sort of got on the end of a cross to tap in close range. So a reprieve for Örebro. They finally get some a win on the board.
Yeah, and thanks very much for all the questions that have come. Just one come in late as we're actually going on air now from Team Overs. Allsvenskan best 11 against Eliteserien best 11. Who would win? I think we're probably going to need a little bit more time to think about that one, aren't we, Jonathan? But no doubt we will answer that in the future. But yeah, once again, I really appreciate all your support on the Twitter with the questions, all the patrons as well. You know who you are. Thank you very much. And I think that about wraps it up for this episode, Jonathan.
Yeah, well, we've got a midweek round as we mentioned, so I'll just read some of every team's playing basically, but we've got Hacken, Örebro, Djurgården, Sirius, Elfsborg, Kalmar, IFK. That should be a good game. That's one I'll be keeping an eye on. Varberg, Hammarby, and then this Thursday we've got Halmstad, Mjällby, AIK, Malmo, huge game, and then Norrköping, Degerfors, battle of the 3-4-3s as well, which I may have a little eye on as well. So some big games, and I'm really enjoying the season so far. I think the tactical flexibility and a lot of teams are going for it. Even smaller teams they're attacking, and like I say, that tactical flexibility has made teams. Allsvenskan used to be a very much 4-4-2 kind of meat and 2 veg kind of league, but there's a bit of spice and flavour about it now at the moment, and long may it continue because I really am enjoying it.
That's good to hear. Glad that you got your mojo there for the league, Jonathan, and. Unfortunately, you do have that 6-week break to look forward to, but I'm sure you'll be disappointed as well.
Yeah, well, I will be gutted about that.
So get your fixation in now, before you have to have this sort of drought over there, and you can get your Eliteserien fix instead. Maybe you might even switch over to somewhere like Finland for a little bit.
Well, I think we had a question about Finland, didn't we, recently? I'll have to go back through the messages. But one thing I did know, one thing that will happen in Allsvenskan, obviously, Steve, is there'll be the transfer window will open, the summer transfer window. So, the league could look very different by the time we come back, because players like Akun Kumiamu, for example, I think he'll be probably very, very highly coveted. Joseph Akumu at Elfsborg, I think there's French and Belgian clubs looking at him. So by the time we actually come back from this break, things could look very, very different, and it could change the course of the season.
Brilliant, and we look forward to doing another episode again very soon. There's also going to be an episode with a guest, a coach in Scandinavia coming out very soon, an in-depth episode there. So look out for that. and we'll be back again next week, my friend. It was a pleasure as always, and I'll see you very soon.
Yeah, if you haven't followed us on Patreon, we do some bonus episodes at times. Patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Check out the fantasy leagues as well. Allsvenskan doesn't tend to update its league that quickly, so we can't read
They are slow. They are so slow.
Yeah, we can't read out the leaderboard at the moment because they haven't updated it. So, but yeah, and thanks a lot to our Patreons, and of course, as I say, Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. Go back if you haven't listened to the preseason previews. It's all out there now. Tons of content this last 10 weeks, or 10 episodes. So I hope you're enjoying it. And thanks to all the new listeners and new followers, because we have had a groundswell of followers, haven't we, recently, Steve? So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us again on this episode. And goodbye from me, Jonathan Fadugba. I've
honestly seen more movement in a sloth than the Allsvenskan fantasy getting updated. It's frustrating. Anyway, yes, that's my rant. Goodbye, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you again very soon.